Oh, good morning, guys.
Good
How are we
morning.
doing?
Morning.
Doing well. Doing well.
Good to see you guys both here. So nice to have you. John, thanks for joining the stream. How are you doing, buddy?
Good. Thanks for having me. I was just thinking, I was listening to your last live stream while I was shoveling snow. So you got me through a good 6 inches of snow. So I appreciate
wow.
it. And I learned something. So
Well, good. That's good.
I'm kind of surprised about that last part.
Yeah. Shocking.
Shocking.
Well, maybe not from you guys, but Andy, he knows a lot. So.
Yeah.
Well, yes, of course.
Right.
Clearly, we just like coordinate people who have intelligence. That's
why we have guests.
Yeah.
You ever watch a show where it's just the two of us? It's a massive set of failures.
Lots of disappointment goes all around.
Yeah, you're too humble. You're too humble.
We're gonna do it live. Oh shoot.
Well, hey, welcome everyone to the live stream. Great to see everybody here. Drop us a little note in the chat. Are you new? Hashtag new if you're new to the chat. Hashtag old if you've been here for a while. It's great to see everyone. And frankly, the more you interact with the chat, the more YouTube and LinkedIn and all that stuff share this video out to people. So I'd really appreciate it if you did. All right. Now, we are going to be diving into a topic very soon here. But this question is, or this conversation is for you, right? Like John's, we've seen John's presentation, Kevin and I have. So but it's for you. We want you to see this. So if you have questions, put those into the chat with a Q colon. We're happy to like stop John when he's on a roll and like totally distract him from what he's talking about and to answer your off-topic questions. So but we're happy to bring that together. All right. Now, John, for people who don't know you, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Chris. So hi, I'm John Kerski. I've been working as a consultant for, I'm dating myself, well over a decade, working on Microsoft products. And over the last several years, been getting into the Power BI space. And I do a lot of work with government community cloud, but also commercial sectors. And I work for a company called Client First Technologies. So we're a small company who specialize in project management and data ops. So big passion of mine.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
now,
data ops is a huge passion of yours. We ought to put his blog site up if you want to put that in our chat so Chris could post that. Because you got tons of articles on different data ops type of stuff. I mean, the DAX testing that we'll talk about today is just one part of it.
Yeah. And John, correct me if I'm wrong. You're going to be at FabCon this year, correct?
That's correct. I will be there and presenting on a similar topic, but diving a little more into some of the fabric features, hopefully.
Oh, excellent. So if you're going to be at FabCon, I think this is your last day. If you want to take part in this, we are all fans of the show are going to be like connecting, and we're all going to be wearing our best day ever t-shirts. So if you want to order, it takes a long time for these to ship out. There's
this is the salesman and you coming out. You're such a good at plugging this.
Yeah, I'm a great salesperson. They are low quality. They are they're expensive, and I make upwards of 85 cents on every t-shirt I sell. So I do it 100% for the money, and I'm kidding, right? But I'm not really kidding about how long they take. So if you want to get in on this and you want to be part of this, order a t-shirt now. Because we're going to be there, and you're going to see one of the days we'll tweet out what day everybody's going to wear the shirts, and we'll all be walking around having the best day ever at FabCon. All right. So
speaking of having the best day ever, did you see what Christina put in the chat?
What did she put in the chat?
Happy Valentine's Day, everybody.
Oh, yeah.
This is her reminding us dumb husbands that after the live stream, you got to go do something. all the last minute purchasing that we do.
Hit that florist.
Yeah. And yeah, I'll admit I was out last night with the 4 other guys at the flower rack looking for flowers and whatnot. I did feel a little bad because there were 4 guys looking for flowers, and there were like 10 women standing back, just like watching us shop for flowers. And I don't know what that was all about, but it was interesting to see that.
Making videos, YouTube shorts. Just be like, look at these guys.
Yeah, they don't know what they're doing. Look, he picked up the one that's all dead.
Yeah. This is gonna go viral.
That's exactly right. Oh, and hey, look at that. Power BI Park is in the house. Hey, man, welcome. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Donald
Valentine's Day is
also
over.
took care of his flowers last night. So
Chef Donald.
Awesome. And I don't think we're gonna at FabCon. I don't think we have time to coordinate an open mic night. But I love the jokes that were going on in the chat. Those were some fabulous ones around
and what
data
was
and mining.
Jason's? Do you have Jason's happen to be queued up?
Oh, where did it go? I did, and then I screwed up.
Oh, he was like they were
Oh,
talking about how excited they are, and yeah, if this was a concert, is there a mashup pit?
Oh, jeez. Well, my daughter had one. I'm sitting next to her on the metro. We're gonna head down into DC, and she goes, "Dad, where do data analysts go to mine?" And I was like, "I don't know." She goes, "Power Quarry." I was like, "Oh." My second thought is like
short.
Yeah, that was the second thought was like, man, I'm talking a lot about Power BI in front of her. And she's only
and to have it on the metro just kind of at a random point.
Yeah. Where's that coming from?
It's fun.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh my gosh, this is a good one. Tough to rhyme semantic link labs with something. Jason,
sounds like a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. Challenge accepted. Co-pilot.
There you go.
Roses are red, violets are blue. Use semantic link labs. It will help you.
Oh, there we go. Well done, Kevin.
Smooth.
Yeah.
That's why my wife loves me. I'll say that to her later today, and she'll just look at me like, "What the hell?"
Yeah, put that in the card.
Yeah.
Oh, well, good to see everyone. Good to get this stuff started. But the whole point of this live stream is we're going to be talking about DAX testing. What do we mean by that when we're talking about that, John?
Well, it's my love language, testing. So when I ever have anybody on my team says, "Hey, John, I built a test," and I was just like, "Okay, you made my day." So yeah, so the idea with testing, especially when we're working with semantic models, is to try to avoid seeing the same error twice in production. I know for myself, it's very easy. You go into Power Query, you're making updates, and that one step that you thought was benign actually changed the data type or filtered out some data, or you left that filter in, and then you went back and you're like, "Oh, publish this," and then you get a phone call like an hour later say, "Well, why is like only the eastern part of the US showing up in the report?" And you're like, "Oh." That's why we test. And then it's okay the first time, you get the, "All right, I forgive you." But the second time it happens and your customer is like, you did it again, then this is why you test, because they start losing trust in the stuff that you do. And I also say testing is really important because it needs to be that safety net to avoid burnout. If you want to hand off the semantic model development to somebody else who doesn't know the model, they can at least know that instead of like publishing and praying that they didn't break something they hadn't seen before, they can actually run the test and know like, all right, that complicated DAX measure or that complicated Power Query that I just did is I didn't break something that we had a test case for. And you can go on vacation, or you can work on the next new thing, or like get a fabric certification instead of having to babysit those models.
Yeah, John, you're spot on. I've often talked like the difference between an engineer, a senior engineer, and an architect is like implementing exactly those types of capabilities. You can't stop being an engineer until you've evolved your the solutions you're building until they're able to do some of the things that you're talking about. You can't stop being a senior engineer until you've architected the solution to the point where you are able to step away from it and you are able to transition that work on. Otherwise, you will forever own that activity. And if that's what you want, hey, God bless, right? We need engineers, we need senior engineers. I think a lot of people like a career path, and that's what's critical for that to happen.
Totally agree.
I also think the point you brought up, right, is the things that we do just become complex, right? Because you could put different things into different layers, right? And so many people, especially the junior people that come off like, hey, this changed or this broke or whatever. Well, I don't know. It was just weird technology stuff at that time. But if you have the right test set up, yeah, Chris is laughing because I hear that all the time. I'm like, no, everything's explainable, right? But if you have tests set up at those different layers, now it's a whole lot easier to explain what broke and why, and then you know how to fix it going forward. So, but today's layer is the DAX layer, right?
Yeah. So one of the beautiful things about Power BI in the last year is they introduced this feature called DAX Query View. And we had, on my teams, we had been building tests that use DAX and kind of keep it separate. And now we can actually keep it with the model, which has kind of made it so much easier to be able to share tests with other folks, even with folks who are still using like OneDrive Sync and PBIX. The DAX queries stay with that model. Or if you move to Power BI project file, you can keep those tests in source control. So that has made things a lot easier to manage, and DAX Query View is a pretty cool tool. So I know, Kevin, you've done a lot of demos on that that I've sit down on.
Yeah. So basically, somebody on the team is picking up a model to make a change to it. Like, one of the first expectations is they're going through those saved DAX queries within the model to kind of learn what they're doing, see what tests are available, know all of that before they even make change one. Is that kind of correct?
Yeah, so when we have somebody inherit a model, the first thing I said is check out DAX Query View, look at the tests, then you can kind of move up the chain, look at the relationships, then look at the data, and then you can look at the visuals. And then you kind of appreciate, okay, what things should I be watching out for as I'm making updates to the model, even before you open the Power Query window, which I usually recommend after you take a look at the tests.
Yeah. Yeah. So not only just does it, save you time or whatever, right? It's a good learning tool. That's a good point.
It is, and what I really like about it is it can be a test bed for not just building tests, but for folks to kind of do sandboxing and figure out how to work with a model without worrying that it's going to show up in the model that gets published. I know a lot before DAX Query View, you see a lot of these like little DAX queries that somebody would have as scar tissue that they've tried out and then like didn't delete and they don't get used. Your model's a lot cleaner using DAX Query View.
You mean those hidden measures that you've been playing with, but you forgot about because that was like 18 months ago, and now there's 400 of them in the model, and I don't have to go clean all that stuff out all the time.
Yeah, at least it's sitting in tabs that people aren't open up.
Yeah.
You're not airing your dirty laundry out there for everybody else to see with your published model.
I'll say to piggyback on this, and I don't know what you were doing with your DAX queries in the past, but we were dropping them in text files that were in a repository that we had automation that would go and read them. And it was so disconnected that if
Yeah.
you didn't know like exactly how to go get that, it was impossible to just find that. And I think DAX Query View makes that so much more accessible because you could just say, like you said, like, hey, here's the model. Here's the things I want you to review as part of that model, right? Review your facts, review your DIMs, review your row level security, review your bidirectionals, review your perspectives, review your DAX query validations, right? Like that's all
Review
bundled
bidirectional
together.
is very short because there are none. So
Well, there shouldn't be any,
It
but
shouldn't be.
you know how all that works,
I know
right?
there's times I've had to use it. That's why I'm saying it's a very short step.
Yes, it should be. It should be short, but like,
Kind of like me.
yeah.
Got jokes.
I thought we're on joke day, so
Oh,
Yeah,
there
but
we go.
it was really disconnected to your point. I mean, I usually would have folks using Visual Studio. You're having to keep files separate, and then you're opening them up in DAX Studio or another tool just to run queries, and it is disconnected.
Yeah.
yes, Jason just got banned for. Well, one of the moderators, please put Jason in timeout.
Okay.
He was just waiting to use calculated columns. I just knew
it. That's his jam. And hey,
Yeah.
if you're sitting there thinking, boy, I would like to be super cool like Jason and have a star next to my name, become a member of the channel for as little as $5 a month. You can have a star next to your name when you post on LinkedIn or on YouTube. It's a special state. So.
Does it get you around being banned too? So
no, you'll still get banned if you bring up DAX columns. We don't.
Somebody
do
actually did it. Put him in timeout for. and somebody deleted the message.
Lose subscribers. I'm red. Holy crap.
Well done.
Oh, holy cow. Sorry.
Peter, we learned something new today.
Oh my goodness.
I once got put on a timeout and guy in a cube by accident because one of the moderators was trying to do somebody else and it was scrolling so fast they hit my name. And I'm like, what?
Oh, good deal. All right. So, John, we've been talking for a little bit. Can you show us what are we even talking about here?
Yeah, what does this DAX query pattern even look like?
Oh yeah, so I can show you. So I've got Power BI desktop up here, and I'll try to use Zoom it. So for a lot of our reports, we start off with this basic schema here, and we'll keep with a tab name. So we'll do something like .tests, so that way we can distinguish what is maybe just a working sample versus what's actually a test we want to use. And in a lot of cases, we'll actually distinguish even further. If we just want the test to be for dev branch or development environment, we'll put a sample.dev.test. And that way, later on, when we're integrating this through like CI/CD pipelines, depending on the branch, we know which test cases to run. And that makes it a lot easier to work with. And then when you have the tabs kind of identified, what we'll do is we'll start with a sample file, and we stick with a schema. So DAX does a really good job of building tables. So what we do is actually kind of put together each test as a row, and that row is using the DAX function. And then we give it a column name, and we stick with the schema. It's test name, expected value, and actual value. And if I zoom out and come down here, there's one more column that gets added right at the end, and that's comparing the expected value with the actual value. So if I was just to run this in DAX Query View, and for those, if you don't see this in your tool, well, you should probably be upgrading to the latest version of Power BI desktops, because I think we're going close to a year now that this went GA. So make sure you get it upgraded. If I hit run, zoom in here, this is, you can see it puts out the test name, the expected value, actual value, and whether or not it's passed. And so as we fill out the tests, what we'll train our staff to do is you kind of go through each of the test files and just hit run after you make updates and make sure nothing's broken. And this has kind of been what we call the PBIX pattern, is you can save everything and it stays with the file. So if I was to share this or upload it to OneDrive, somebody downloads it, opens it up on their end, all these tests are sitting with that model so that we can work together on making updates to it. And so that's kind of the bare bones. You have the naming conventions on the tabs are consistent. You end it with .test or tests, and you stick with a schema on what represents a test. And some of the basic is what are you testing? What's the expected value? What's the actual value? And that final one's automated is, does it match?
So this is very interesting. It's a good start, but it looks like right now you have actual value hard coded.
Yes. So it is hard coded in some cases. So we have testing, kind of three areas of testing. We test content. So you're testing the content of the tables. You test the calculations. So you test your DAX measures. And then the final one is testing your schema. So the reason you want to test your content is you want to understand after every time you do a refresh, is the columns meeting the expectations. And I can show you guys just kind of a real simple way of doing it in DAX Query View. And one of the beautiful things of using DAX Query View is you don't have to actually write a lot of DAX. So I'm not I'm not Marco, I'm not Alberto, I'm not a DAX expert, and I'll never claim to be. But I'll try to leverage what the tool does, because it generates DAX all the time, and it should be good DAX, or at least good enough to run that I can run those tests.
Yeah, I think that'll be good to show, because to me, the right DAX to use is, like you said, is the DAX that Power BI itself, the visuals or whatever, is going to produce, right? Because you may need to take some filtering context into play and things like that, right? So
yeah, exactly. So if you're looking at like testing content, a simple scenario is, let's say you've got a database administrator. They tell you, that column that we give you, it should never have any nulls in it. And, you go through the process and it's fine. And then like a month later, there's nulls in it. And you're like, and people are like, hey, why am I seeing blank in the filters or something like that? And you're like, oh, okay. Well, how do you kind of catch that as you're making updates, or if you've got these tests in production, having them run? Well, DAX Query View's got a really cool quick queries feature that if you right click, so I've got this alignment dimension, and I can put up the QR code later if you want to download the file. We've got it on GitHub. You right click and you can actually run on column statistics. And so if you click on that, it will open up a brand new tab. So down here, it created this new tab called Query 1. And it gives you, for every column, a bunch of DAX expressions that represent that statistic. And so in the case, let's say I've got like alignment key is the one that it's coming from the database. It shouldn't be null. Well, what I can do is scroll to where alignment key is down here, which I think it's right there. And I can actually just copy that DAX over to my test cases. So I didn't even have to write anything. I could just copy this over. And then I'll go back to my sample test file here. And maybe the first thing I'll do is say, alignment key should not have nulls. And what I usually coach is have something descriptive enough that when it shows up in the error report or in the test on the bottom, you kind of know what it is. I've even gotten it to the point where some of it's like, hey, this happened on this date. We're just testing to make sure it doesn't happen again. And
wait, you mean like if standard is to have test on these things, you don't just say column name ABC, test 1, test 2, test 3.
Yeah, you don't do.
You know, you don't
be
do
descriptive.
that?
Yes, yes. Not to shoot Microsoft down, but some of those error messages are ambiguous. Those test names, when they fail, need to be descriptive.
Yes.
So.
Do you ever add in a comment around like what the resolution has been in the past for a given failure or test? Like, hey, this probably means your semantic, or what the heck is the sync from dynamics is down or broken. Reestablish that dynamic sync, right?
Yeah, I have. I've actually had it where it's like, hey, call this person or call this office because that means the gateway's down.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Yeah, no, those are good breadcrumbs to give. And I've even seen some people get fancier with some of them. Those just have like a URL to like some wiki page or a OneNote, shared OneNote to go, here's how you troubleshoot it. Here's the steps, which is pretty nice. So if I wanted to grab that actual value, I've already copied it. I can just paste that here. And if I run it, the expected value is 1, so it should fail. Oh, I just need to not click there. And you'll see, because I have the value of 1 here, it's saying it's false. So if it was to ever show up, if I switch this back to 0, because I should have 0 nulls in that column. Now that passes. And if I'm ever running this, maybe I've updated Power Query, maybe I have this test run in production. If that fails, then I know very quickly that, oh, something either I did or the underlying data has changed such that it's not meeting the expectations. And so we'll do that on quite a few of the really critical columns as we're building out our model. And then I usually have a guide, like you don't just build tests for test's sake. Anytime you kind of stub your toe on something metaphorically that you're like, I made that mistake as I was working on something, build a test for it. If you put it to user testing and somebody noticed something and it's a mistake, build a test for it. You start building that safety net. And then obviously if it's in production and you see an error, fix it in production, but also think about, let me get a test in place so I don't see that error in production again. And so you'll be surprised over a good year, you can actually build a pretty healthy safety net just on testing content.
Yeah, I will admit we had a rule that anytime there was an outage or a SEV-A ticket created against our reports or models, that where the issue was something with data quality, that we had to have one or more validation scripts added into our process, so that it wasn't just, okay, yeah, we fixed it for now, but we fixed it for now, and we've ensured that that's not going to have it be an issue in the future.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing worse than your customer seeing that same issue again. Or it goes a lot, even if it shows up again in production, if you know about it before they do, and you call them and say, sir, ma'am, we've identified the issue, we're working on it, we'll get it fixed, I'll give you an update in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. That builds trust. They're like, oh, okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, they know you got it covered.
Wow, you're really you put yourself out there if you're going to give an update in 5 or 10 minutes. Go on 30-minute increments.
Well,
but,
if it's a major outage, you usually have to get peppered if you didn't give an answer in 5-10 minutes. So,
well, at least your initial one, and then you got to get to
exactly
a longer cadence so you could work on it. But that's a different topic for a different thing.
Exactly. No. So that's testing like the content. Do you want to see how I test DAX measures without necessarily written DAX?
Yeah.
Heck yeah. How do you do that?
Yeah. So what I love doing is let's say I have this measure here, and I believe that's my one here, number of characters. Not the best measure in the world, but a good one to example as an example. If I want to run it under certain conditions, let's say I've got a certain alignment or a certain time period that I want to make sure that that number always matches. And a good thought process when you're testing DAX measures is make sure that the underlying data is kind of either time bound or static. So that way you understand that if that number changes, it's more likely you changed the DAX code and maybe inadvertently caused some issue to occur. I'll have a lot of tests around blanks, making sure a blank doesn't show under certain conditions, because people always call about blanks, something a little bit better than, maybe not available or no data for this thing. It's a better way to present it. But what I'll do, I'll just open up a blank tab and go up to the view here and open up Performance Analyzer. And then I'll just create one of my favorite visuals for testing, which is just a card visual. Put that in there, and then I'll bring over that measure. And let's say I want to add a filter to it. I'll just go up here. Let's say I want to just apply this filter on alignment. I'll put it on the filters on this visual. And then at this point, I'm going to hit start recording and then just hit right here. And you'll notice, I know it's smaller font here, so I'll try to zoom in, that the card visual actually has some DAX. And with DAX Query View, I can actually have it copy that DAX over into DAX Query View, which is really nice. So if I hit run, it opens up a new tab here at the bottom.
Wow.
And you've got the DAX already built, which it's done the nice, hey, put the define the variable for the filter, and output that result.
Holy
and I didn't
crap.
have to write
that. That is just
one of my favorite functions, treat as. It solves a lot of problems.
It does. It does. But I didn't have to write out that DAX. I didn't spend hours writing that DAX. I let Power BI write the DAX for me. And you can imagine, that was a very trivial kind of filter. But if you have a bunch of filters under certain contexts, you just keep adding them to the filter pane, and it captures that context for you. And then you can. Then the next step is just moving this over to the test case. So what I'll do is I'll take that evaluate out, and then I'm going to call it just test case 2 for right now. And I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to go back over to sample tests and scroll up to the top and just paste it in here. And then make sure I put an equal there. So everything I need to run that test case now is in the context of this DAX file. And I can say, under alignment setting bad, we get, that number that comes out. And so if I paste test case 2, you see that says 7720 at the bottom here. And I can make sure that that's the number that matches. And I've even seen it, if you want to get real fancy, is if there's another way that you want to test that DAX, you can write DAX for here. You don't have to hard code that value. You can have other variables to compare to. As long as they're the same type, you've got a way to test your DAX measures. And so now you can see that's the comparison you get. And so I didn't have to write a lick of DAX. The most I did was Control-C, Control-V, and a couple clicks.
Nice.
I think this is fantastic, because what I think this also does, the technique you illustrated, while you went and created a separate tab to, just for simplicity's sake, for the demo's sake, you showed us how to get it from one visual. But I know a lot of people who have a lot of visuals on a page with lots of slicers and interactivity and all sorts of stuff that they are trying to test out. And it's really hard for them to, how do I figure out how to get that DAX? But with that query view and that performance analyzer, it is just as simple on that complex page as
Yep.
it is on that
Yep.
that simple page to get it. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think that also goes back to what you said earlier, right? Is you may think of while you're developing of X number, a small number of tests to put in, right? But then, you run into a problem where somebody grabbed a slicer or something in there, and then all of a sudden they're going, wait, this value isn't correct,
Mhm.
right? And so then you use this technique to then add another test to when you fix it. You can make sure that you get the right test. And so the biggest thing is don't overwhelm yourself, right, with trying to come up with all of these cases on day one, right?
Yes,
You build it.
exactly.
I mean, I want to keep reiterating because you said that is over time, do that, which then I think kind of leads to a couple comments that came up in the chat between Christina and Chewy. And Christina's point was that she thinks it becomes easier to build this culture into place when you're there longer than a couple months, right? So a lot of us as consultants, you have shorter term engagements, and maybe if you're there longer, you're able to kind of put this into place. I would kind of think, and I'd like to hear, John, from your experience, but what I would think is if you're a consultant and you got a turnover kind of model, if you're putting this in place as you build it, and then that becomes part of the turnover documentation, hey, client, this is here, right? I don't know that you have to be at a place very long in order to just kind of help them establish the culture. Now, they could choose not to continue to use it, but you've done your best to set it up.
Yeah, if you give them the foundation and it's especially enough examples to work off
Mm-hmm.
of, then I have seen it where I've handed off a model to somebody else, gone away for like 6 months, come back, and I've seen more test cases. And I've even had it where I made a mistake and I see the test case fail, and it's like, oh, okay, I get why you did that for some
Mm-hmm.
matrix visual quirk that I had to figure out. Okay, that makes sense. And agreed. There is a little bit of culture from data ops that you have to adopt in it. But within those couple months, if you're explaining to them like, hey, this is how you avoid the 2 a.m. phone call or the
Mm-hmm.
angry boss when they're in a presentation seeing a broken visual, like this, when you catch it and they just see no news is good news, they just see data and they can make decisions, your life is better.
well, and I would imagine this also gives you an action item that you can then do to tell that boss, like, hey, not only did I fix it, but I also added in a test script so we won't be encountering this again in the future, right? Or it'll be easier or faster for us to fix in the future, right?
Yeah. For those who, at least bosses who understand, the mistakes and healing client relationships, they understand like, hey, if I built something where catch it earlier the next time, they're more comfortable that they're not going to be surprised. And most bosses I've ever worked with, they don't like surprises. So
Mm-hmm.
and most surprises are probably bad in
Yeah.
the IT world. So
No, I've got a question for you, John. Like, I love what you have here. But that's in the model. That's something like I would have to go in and run that to validate that. Is there a mechanism where I could build that into like my CI/CD process or into my loads? How can I automate what you've just showed us?
yeah, so a big piece of this, and I actually have like a development background working with JavaScript and .NET. The first thing we kind of realize is, all right, do you really want to click on each one of these tabs and run the tests? In some cases, yeah, that's okay. In other cases, you want to just be able to like click a button or run a script and say, did any of the tests fail? Am I good? And so what we actually built is if you can save this into Power BI project file, so PBIP,
Mm-hmm.
you can do that. And I can show you real quick just how that works.
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
So as you're setting it up, I think this kind of gets to Christina put a question in of curious, what does the minimum viable product might look like for testing? And I
Yeah,
think as
so
you just kind of hit on, at least having them in there that if you have to click one by one, right, would probably be the minimal. This would be a step above that. Is that correct?
yeah, that's a step above that. So the minimum viable product, I usually say, test all the important columns in the relationships, test your problem child DAX measures,
Mhm.
and then make sure you've got tests for schema, which I can show you guys a little bit later. I got an example how you test schemas.
Okay.
So that way, if you accidentally rename something, that report that relies on this model doesn't break or have a broken visual, or at least you'll know about it before you go publish it. So with these tabs, if I save this as the Power BI project file, so I've already saved this as PBIP. And for those who haven't worked with PBIP before, you can actually go into the preview features. And if this pops up for me in a reasonable amount of time, there we go. There is this preview feature that you can turn on. You don't have to turn these on if you don't need to.
That second one, please don't turn on yet.
Yeah, please not yet. I will say if you're going to save in the PBIP format, at least it's going to save it into the model.bim, which has been stable for years. So you really don't have to worry. And the report.json file that has the visual stuff, that's been the same way for at least the last couple of years. So the pretty stable formats that you're working with. And I've actually have our development processes been running for well over a year without any issues, just using the model.bim and the report.json format.
You're not using the on-object interactions. What's wrong, John?
Not on this file. So in my other area, maybe.
I'm kidding. I don't know.
Not for my demo.
I've encountered my first person in the wild using that. I was just like, I don't even know how to help you at this point. I'm sorry.
It is funny. I definitely see people who started out with Excel Power Query turn this on.
Oh, really?
Whereas, yeah, where folks coming from other development tools and other data analytics tools don't necessarily have this on. I think it's that familiarity with kind of how charts get built with on-object interaction.
Definitely feels more Excel-like. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I've got this saved as PBIP. And if I go to Visual Studio Code here and I opened up that folder where the file's stored, you'll see it's got the sample model here that's got the report, the model, and then that PBIP file. Now, the PBIP file is just a JSON pointer to tell Power BI Desktop where to open that file up. The actual meat of your data is in the report and in the semantic model. But even cooler is you've got all the DAX query tabs that I was showing you in Power BI Desktop get saved as individual files, which makes this automatable at this point, because now I can tap into each one of these files and run the tests. So we actually have a script that we published on PowerShell Gallery, so you're free to install it. Obviously, with your company, they'll have their policies on bringing in third-party code, but you just run this install command if you're using PowerShell Core, and it's called invoke DQV testing. And once you install it, you can run this command right here. And what it will do is if you have that model open, now the model has to be open on your desktop, because for those that don't know, when you're running Power BI Desktop, it runs a little version of SQL analysis services on a port that you can interact with. And so we want to connect to that using PowerShell and run those tests over the XMLA endpoints here, just to run the test like you would clicking. And so that's key. You got to have the file open in order to run the tests. So when I run that, you see it ran all the tests on each file, and you can see it ran the test on that file. And the output, if you ever run pester tests, I tried to model that. And then let's show you what it looks like if you fail the test. So if I just make an arbitrary change here as an example, that test fails. If I go back to Visual Studio Code, and one thing I need to make sure is I save. Now when it runs, let me close this. I had this happen to me. Let me open the file back up. This has happened to me this morning. I'm running some other tests in the background, so I think the port that was running closed. Let me open this back up once it Power BI desktop decides to load again. So this is where we cue the Jeopardy music.
All right, chat. Now's the time to
So
put
once
your
the port
joke back in. While we're waiting for this to open.
Not about calculate columns, though.
So yeah, let's not get any more people banned, right? So actually, this leads to a great question, John, that I'm actually working on a video on right now. When you talk to people about desktop requirements for working with Power BI, what are the minimum specs that you recommend to someone who's running it for doing Power BI development? Do you have a recommendation?
So
200
our
cores
basic
and,
is
500 gig of RAM.
yeah. So I don't really control a lot of the hardware specs, but from the software specs, it's always you need at least 16 gigs. I'll say that for your Power BI desktop. But Visual Studio Code, Git, PowerShell core, and then I've got third-party tools that we use that will load in. So Tabular Editor is key, but it's you want the paid version or 2.0. So because we'll run Best Practice Analyzer, and then we use PBI Inspector. So Nat over the Microsoft team will use that for what I found is the easiest front end testing tool that you can have these days with the rules files and actually look at it. So, and a lot of our work, we have to make sure there's some level of accessibility testing. His tool makes it so much easier to test for those situations at this point.
Oh, that's awesome.
Interesting.
I'm going to say preview for everyone on the stream. It's a Pentium 5 or higher, and 32 to 64 gigs of memory is what I'm now starting to recommend. 32 is the minimum. 64 is the ideal for doing Power BI development. The reason being, I don't know if anyone's been paying attention to your utilization of Windows and Office lately, but I've seen Windows and Office consuming over 12 gigs of memory and doing nothing else. So when Windows and Office is now consuming that much memory, you have to like really up it, and so 32 is the minimum, 64 is the ideal for
I don't know that it's
memory.
Office. For me, it's all my browser tabs. Keeping 100 browser tabs open when I look at
Kevin,
that.
what are you looking at? Like, come on now, man.
It's a lot of different Microsoft links. Like, wait a minute, what did I read here? What did I read? Or like yesterday, trying to answer some questions, going, "Oh, I need to give this link out." Then I forget to close that tab. And
oh, I'm the worst about it. I'm the worst. I have like at least 40 running on.
Yeah. All right, and we're back.
Yeah. So the test ran, and you can see I had the failure there. So what we teach our devs to do is you'll have Visual Studio Code up, you have Power BI desktop up, and right before you go to commit this code to source control, because you're using PBIP, just run this test, this one line, and it'll tell you if anything broke. So if you've got 50, 100 tests, it's going to run through it, and you didn't have to, click through to all those tabs, which you probably will miss one tab over time, and that will automate it locally. And the same script that you can run locally, I've got a QR code that walks you through how do you run the tests in a CI/CD pipeline. And that looks something like, if I zoom back out, I can just quickly, that has that look to it.
Oh, that's fantastic. And Zakia is pointing out how much she loves how we're getting more into like the dev world, right? Like this is development, right?
Yes.
This is an engineer who has looked at these challenges and is putting his engineer hat on to do the work. And I agree with Zakia that this is fantastic.
Well, I definitely have seen folks who have the engineering backgrounds look at this and go, all right, well, if I've done this with JavaScript, I got Mocha, I got Jest, why can't I do the same with Power Query code or DAX? And I should be able to automate a lot of this. And especially as where we work in this industry, we become victims of our own success. You get 2 or 3 dashboards or reports out, then you keep asked for more and more and more. And then if you're not adding automation to your workload, you're just going to be just trying to stay above water, just trying to manage all these updates that you're going to have to do, and delegating that work to other folks and hoping that they don't break things.
Very interesting. So let me ask a question. So we got about, a little over 5 minutes left, maybe. But kind of, we were talking, Christina started us down, what's the minimal viable product for this, right? Which we could say getting the query saved, being able to invoke that at the command line level, right? But it also could feel like this takes a lot of time, right? It's a lot of work, right? If I have a story, or a feature that somebody's going to write, and let's say that that feature is going to take a whole day, right? Am I adding a whole nother day to that time just to write the test cases around there, right? And yeah, is there an investment cutoff point or anything on time and the return on it?
Yeah, so obviously there's the training time to get people up to speed, and so that's usually a couple hours just to get somebody up to speed. But I usually add 1 or 2 story points in the first couple of iterations to start getting folks into testing. But once that's in place, that goes down considerably, because if you have that time invested up front, you think about the meetings that you had to have to tell that you broke something, and all the time that you spent on that. It's all the damage control that you're avoiding. That's the cost that you save in the long run, and that's that little upfront. Maybe an hour or 2 the first time you get in these sprints with folks building tests. And if you're using DAX Query View and Performance Analyzer, it shouldn't take you that long to just add a couple minutes to build that next test when something shows up.
Yeah, I think it does feel like once you get over the training, right, and you've implemented the pattern, it definitely becomes a whole lot faster, and it comes down to minutes or adding a lot more points to it. The other part that it feels like is when the test does fail and it prevents something from going to production, you need to communicate that to the upper management, maybe not the higher, right, but at least up to your manager, up to somebody, so that they understand that return on investment, right? Because it's hard to measure the time it saved when it prevented a problem from going in, right? So and so those are the type of things that people just don't tend to see. They could see, I'm spending all this time up front, oh geez, these developers took all this extra time. And then it's because you can't measure, well, this didn't happen, right? You can't measure the negative. So
yeah, what we try to show is the number of tests that we're running, how often they're running in the different environments, and show those metrics. And then, especially in the industry we're with, compared to other folks, and they show those numbers. Are they actually running tests? Just to show how mature your process is. And I think it's a good point, though, as a technical leader. I always talk about there's that external representation for your team. You need to be putting those good news stories out there just to show the value of their work. And testing is value added, because that's how you build good products and stable products.
Yeah.
Especially if you have anyone who's manufacturing minded or with a background in Six Sigma, there's all sorts of mechanisms for being able to, like, standard mechanisms for communicating the value of testing and what it means to catch those things in there. And I would recommend, honestly, if you could capture your failures and capture the things that you test and whatnot, that can really, it can be a metric that you could track over time and be able to articulate, like, hey, look, through automation, we've avoided X number amounts of dollars in additional engineering, additional support, misses on things. And it's, especially leaders who come from manufacturing, they'll recognize that, acknowledge it, and they understand what that comes from, right? And that could be a real good way to communicate that.
Yeah, there's a saying from Chris Berry in data ops that says, we spend all this time doing analytics for customers. Why are we so unanalytic in the work that we do?
Yep.
And think, as a technical leader, you should be thinking about, how do I produce metrics that show how well we're doing, or not well, and how do we improve that in capturing that information?
I have a funny anecdote along that lines, or maybe it's not an anecdote, but a story. Like you, I've been in this space for like over 2 decades now, or I don't know how long you've been actually, but we've been in it for a while, right?
A decade, so you're twice as old.
Yeah. So I'm super old now, and yesterday I went live with the first report in my entire career that I will be the consumer of the report. It was I'm like, I can't believe I've never worked on a project where I'm the end user of the product. So
I'm the product owner.
Did you keep changing the requirements on yourself?
Yeah, that was exactly it. I'm like, it needs to be like this. They're like, well, where'd you get those requirements from? I'm like, me.
Right here.
I have the requirements. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, all right. So it was fantastic. I'm so excited about that project. So, but John, you're exactly right. We need to use the same analytics we do for other people on the work that we do, right? And the second we kind of like pivot our thought from like looking at or looking at looking at other people to looking at ourselves, all of a sudden all sorts of these metrics start to come out and it can be really helpful for us, right?
Yeah, it's amazing once you see the numbers. You can be like, oh, well, we can move to improve that number.
Yeah. I'll say that's where I like scorecards, because then you can actually take snapshots of those scorecards on a daily basis and track it over time, and it becomes really easy to like see that and articulate those values. So, all right. It has been an amazing conversation, John.
And we didn't even get to everything, right?
Yes.
So we put John's link out there, like you said. There's schema testing. There's other type of stuff that unfortunately we didn't get to show, but it was great conversation. Get to his blog, go through all the things that he puts out there, or watch for other type of things. Yeah.
And John, where can people find you next?
So next, I think next month I'll be at SQL Saturday in Atlanta, and and so that's a great event. I saw Emu on the live stream feed, so great event down there. Wonderful set of speakers, great venue. So I recommend getting there, and if you don't want to pay for lunch, it's free, so that's even better. And then obviously I'll be at FabCom at the end of March, early April. So.
Nice.
That's where I'll be next, and I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So if you got any questions, that's probably the most active social media platform I'm using these days.
All right, fantastic, John. Thank you so very much, Kevin. You want to take us out?
Oh no, I wasn't prepared for that, but thank you. I was thinking of Atlanta, because we're gonna have so much fun in Atlanta. But thank you, everybody who joined. Thank you for all of the participation in the chat. We've had a ton of comments, and everybody have the best day ever. Peace.
Digital combines strategic industry insight and advanced technical expertise to uncover and solve your digital transformation challenges. If you're interested in learning more, check out our website at bakertilly.com/digital.